Hi, this is a quick video about my drawing in visual communication design schema. This has been, approached as a model that could be applied when you're designing tasks or assessment around drawing within VCD. It tries to take into account the cognitive and the skill-based aspects of drawing within VCD, plus all the labelling, evaluation, reflection requirements that we see within VCD units. We actually use the VCE study design as the starting point and then look at how it describes the use of drawing within VCD and sort of backward design it from there. So while we're referencing Unit 1, Area of Study 1, it can actually be used in all kind of VCD classes from 7, 10 up through VCE as well, I would hope. All right, so let's have a quick look at that actual description of drawing within VCD. So this is taken directly from Unit 1, Area of Study 1, Drawing as a Means of Communication. So this unit outline describes drawing within VCD as this. Students use observational, visualization and presentation drawings as the means by which ideas and concepts are communicated. Through observational drawing, students develop their understanding of the aesthetics, appearance and function of objects and structures. Students investigate ways of representing form and surface textures and apply different materials and media to render drawings. Students use three-dimensional drawing methods such as paraline and perspective to create three-dimensional freehand drawings that maintain proportion. Students use third-angle orthogonal drawings as a means to represent three-dimensional objects. Students use observational drawings as a starting point for visualizing new design possibilities. They creatively use a range of media to generate drawings that represent alternative visualizations. Freehand visualization drawing methods are used to make thinking visible and to communicate ideas. Drawing is also used as a means of presentation. Students learn how to produce presentation drawings to resolve ideas, refine techniques, and to demonstrate an understanding of the application of selected media and materials. So we can see from this description that drawing is used throughout the design process. And this schema has been designed to sort of reflect that and work in harmony with that cyclical and iterative process. So the schema which I'll walk you through now is intended to be used repeatedly throughout VCD studies and be used back and forward, I guess, like you would do the design process. So you can step through a few stages of it, then step back to a previous stage to resolve something and then move forward through the process. Okay, so let's take a look at what this schema looks like. So the VCD drawing schema which I've drawn up comprises of a few layers that we can dig down into. At its most basic level, it's comprised of two halves. The first half is observation and the second half is production. And these are reflective of the steps that students should go through when they approach any drawing task. The first half is understanding how to see and look at objects, and then the second half is how to translate that observation or concept which they've come up with into a drawing, and then the skills and techniques which they need to use to accomplish that. So first, looking at the observation half, these are the stages which this model is comprised of. We have looking, then seeing, a step which I've called spatial location, and then translation. And then we move into the production side of things with depiction, analysis, evaluation, annotation, and finally reflection. Now each of these steps are kind of governed by the overall design process context that this task is sitting within. So if you look back at the design process cycle, depending on where students are within that, so whether it be part of research, idea generation, development of concepts, refinement or presentation, will dictate the sorts of things which they'll be doing at each of these stages. So for example, if we're in the research stage, this drawing process will be kind of defined by the aspects that relate to observational drawings. Likewise, if they're in the development of concepts, then we'll be looking more at the skills required for visualization drawings. All right, so let's drill down into each of these steps to see what each stage looks like. The first step within the observational side of things is looking, and this is purely the physical act of gazing at an object. So it's all about students' position in relation to objects, so viewer and object positioning, and the requirement for focus and attention. So I guess in the very early stages of teaching VCD, this is what you'd need to be really paying close attention to. Are the students looking at the object? Are they focusing in on aspects of that object, or are they distracted by other things in the room? It might seem very basic, but it's a really important first step in drawing. And we'll move on to the seeing stage. Now this is where looking becomes more than just the physical thing. It's now becoming the student's acknowledgement of what they're looking at. So it is that acknowledgement of the object and paying attention to it, and it's starting to collect information about the attributes and storing them in some way. It's looking at the macro, micro and meta information which students can gather about the object, and as we step through the levels of visual communication design, the complexity of each of these attributes increases. And now it's important to say at this stage the object can be physical, so real and in front of them, or it could be imaginary. So it could be something which, within the development of concept, something which the students are developing conceptually. Okay, so the next step is the spatial location stage. And at this point, students define relationships in 3D space. So they're now relating that object that they're looking at to the world around them. So they orient that object within a field, and they take into account environmental and contextual factors. So these could be things like their own viewpoint and issues around perspective, and also things like lighting and atmosphere and other things which would impact how that object looks within space. And finally, within the observation stage is translation. So here's where students abstract the object in front of them into a sort of a cognitive model. At this stage, we start to form some really critical aspects related to VCD in terms of measurement, scale, thinking about projections and elevation, so how you look at faces on a 3D object. Also thinking about explosions, so how a complex object can be broken apart and what might be inside it. And also simplification into outline, form, shape and colour. So our elements and principles start to come in here as well. And also thinking about geometry and what sort of primitive shapes can be used to make up the complex shape that they see in front of them. So now that students have formed this sort of cognitive model of the object that they need to draw, we move into the production side of things. And this point is probably the biggest one in the set, in that we could probably dig down quite a few more layers here. So the depiction category is probably what most people think about when you talk about drawing, in that we're talking about the instruments, tools, techniques, skills, and how students select these to be appropriate for the task. And it's about working towards a mastery of a skill, I suppose. and certainly the use of elements and principles, particularly form, shape, colour, texture. So it's about how students develop these skills and then how they select them to be appropriate for the task at hand. So I won't go into further details within this model, but certainly this can be expanded much, much further depending on the context of the drawing task that you're in. So for instance, if you're doing observational drawings, then your instruments, tools and techniques would revolve around manual drawing tasks, shading, using pencils, using charcoal, using paint, and that's just one example. So this is certainly the richest point within this schema model, and one which needs to be explored a bit further. Following on from depiction, we have analysis. So while drawing and at the conclusion of a drawing, students are constantly comparing their drawing to their cognitive model and comparing it to the context requirements. What that means is teaching students to be looking at their work as they're doing it, refining it as they're working, and understanding how to fit their drawing technique to the task and to the cognitive model of the object which they're drawing. The next step is evaluation. So it's kind of a step beyond analysis. So it's kind of a final decision, like fit for purpose. So is my drawing correct for what I've done? If not, cycling back through the drawing process if required. So it's really important to be empowering students to be able to make these sorts of decisions and be feeling confident and comfortable in doing so. So I guess that's a real key point in terms of learning and developing these skills, is that ability to self-evaluate and return to previous sections within the drawing schema and work back through it until an appropriate level of drawing is achieved. The next step is annotation. So this includes all context appropriate notation. So that means things like dimensions, labels, notes, layout styles, whether that be for presentation boards, what would be appropriate way to present a drawing on a presentation board, or technical drawings in title blocks and those sorts of things. And then of course annotations themselves. So what sort of labels and annotations do you need for an appropriate folio? And then the final stage, reflection. So a reflection on the overall process and indicating points of success and then points that need refinement, which then feed back into the next drawing cycle. So whether that's a similar sort of task or if it's a completely different drawing task, there certainly will be aspects of this process which students can take into their next drawing activity. So yeah, there you have it. That's a VCD drawing schema. I suppose in this I've really tried to unpack more of the observation side of things, because I find a lot of teachers that I've observed kind of miss the point of things, particularly things like technical drawing, in that they feel it's very skill based and that it's something that a lot of students won't take into further study or into professions. But I actually think that tech drawing is one of the things that really teaches students how to see and create those cognitive models in really unique and powerful ways. So I really want to include that within my drawing schema. So that's kind of how it's ended up looking this way. Anyway, I'll leave that with you. Thanks for watching.